Idira. Hello. The tall middle-aged woman stares straight ahead, her eyes vacant as she rubs the implant at her temple. Her collar is undone and one of the clasps is on the verge of falling off. Sensing your presence, Idira turns her head toward you and offers you a crooked smile, even as her eyes look right through you. Idira, about your abilities.
What are you talking about, Lord Captain?
With noticeable effort, Idira focuses her eyes on you and lets out a nervous laugh. You are a psyker. Psykers are only granted the right to live with the Emperor's blessing. Have you ever been to Terra? So we're asking, is she a sanctioned psyker, which we know she's not. I'm concerned about your level of control of your abilities. Again, she's not a sanctioned psyker, so she hasn't gone through that process. I'm worried for the crew. Psykers aren't the safest people to live alongside. I'm a psyker. Come on. I will ask her if she's been to Terra. Oh, no. Psykers are only granted the right to live with the Emperor's blessing. It's a harsh way of phrasing it, but we are playing dogmatic. So I will say it, but we are going to still allow her to work here and work for us, even though we know she's not sanctioned. Because I'm not going to kill off one of my crew members just because she hasn't gone through the sanctioning process.
Look, Lady Theodora couldn't care less if some eggheads measured my brains or not. It's not about the seal on your forehead, get it? It's about what's in your gut, if it's rotten or not. My gut's stronger than the adamantine on this here ship. And my implants are better than the ones they put in you on your Terra. If they weren't, I wouldn't have lived as long as I have.
Idira says nothing for a few seconds and then exaggeratedly rolls her eyes. And then Idira bares her teeth in a savage grin, a febrile gleam in her eyes. So, she was given implants to aid her psychic abilities. And also she's just saying that she is able to resist corruption better than most others, even those who have been sanctioned on Terra, which I don't know is necessarily true. But when Edelthrad was losing control and becoming mutated by the warp, she did successfully hold her own and not give in. So she's definitely, even if she hasn't gone through the proper sanctioning process, she has strengthened herself to the point where she can resist the corruption of the warp better than most unsanctioned psykers. Where do you come from?
Lyra, an outlying world in the Heathen Stars region. In the Koronus Expanse, the deeper you go, the less visible the Astronomicon gets, and the less people know about the Imperium. The arrival of a rogue trader is the best thing that can happen to a world like that. The very best.
Okay, tell me about Lyra.
It's an out-of-the-way planetoid between two faint stars. On Lyra, a dozen local tyrants fight over 5 measly continents. But they use everything they can to win, from poison to psykers. I haven't been there in many years, but there's nothing for me to miss. Trust me.
Idira begins wringing her shaking hands. Presumably she was a psyker who was used in that fighting between the various tyrants. Though she's not... Well, I picture her mainly for her divination skill. That's certainly the role she had with Theodora, was mainly that, but she also knows telekinesis, which is a combat skill. So, potentially she was used for those fighting, but she likely was more used to aid whichever tyrant had control of her.
But here on the ship is a different story altogether. I saw more wonders in my first year serving Lady von Valancius than I'd seen in my whole life on Lyra. Like my first journey through the warp, I was in bed for 3 days. I felt like supernovas were exploding in my head. I only found out later that I'd gotten off easy. Just through the bulkhead in the bay next to mine, a whole team turned into... Look at me rambling on, Lord Captain. Pay no attention.
Whoa, you never finished your story about the first time crossing the warp. I want to hear that.
It wasn't like it was a very fun trip, Lord Captain. But look, If you want to be entertained, I'm the woman for the job. I'll entertain you with one of the stories from my collection, no problem. But if you want to hear about the time I melted everyone in the bay next door, well, I just don't really want to go into the details on that one, alright?
Ah, Idira rubs her nose. So, it sounded like she was saying she got off easy because those in the bay next to her, the whole team turned into. So something happened, but there was nothing in this statement, to my understanding, that made it seem like she was responsible for that. But now she's saying that she melted everyone in the bay next door, so she was responsible for whatever happened to them. What did you do before you came on the ship?
Oh, I embroidered wall hangings in honor of our national heroes. I did the same thing I do here, Lord Captain. Divining. Our rulers prized the ability to see into the future. Every psyker that could be found was worth a small fortune on Lyra.
Idira cackles. Yeah, so she was focused on divining, not on telekinesis. Or the tyrants.
There's no such thing as a peaceful life on Lyra. People like me were especially sought after. They'd pick psykers up wherever they found them, buy kids off their parents, even just abduct them. Take me, for instance. I got taken from my street gang. The older kids sold me when they noticed there was something off about me. The ruling dynasties had schools where they trained us and beat us black and blue. And then they packed us off to serve. Some of us held on for a long time, but others didn't last. Not everyone's as smart and talented as me, you know. Some people crossed the line and were out of commission before their time.
Idira looks at you expectantly, then, as though clarifying, she uses her hands to indicate a head exploding and laughs. So, certainly not any sort of official sanctioning process, but they were trained, and those who were talented enough were able to survive it, and those who weren't ended up dying. Which is not the same as the sanctioning process on Terra, but it probably helped her become as strong as she is without a properly authorized sanctioning process. How did you end up in the Rogue Trader service?
Theodora von Valancius paid a visit to the ruler I was serving at the time. I don't know what the visit was for, and it's no business of mine anyway. I can still remember the way the voices in my head changed when I looked at her. They were practically screaming. She had so much behind her, and plenty ahead of her too.
Idira squints as though she's peering at something far away.
As I gawped at her, all of a sudden I heard a whisper. A hint, a suggestion, nothing more. But I know the difference between idle chatter and a real threat. I seized my chance and approached Theodora. I managed to whisper a couple of words in her ear before the wardens dragged me away. They beat me and locked me up. No wonder. It wasn't my place to converse with outsiders. And then Theodora's people came for me. They broke down the wall, butchered the guards. Also, I could tell them my warning in full. So I said the rest, but I didn't want to go back to my old life. And so I entered the service of the von Valancius dynasty.
Okay, so you had some sort of vision of a real threat to Theodora, and were able to tell her enough to get her interest. Cool. Have you ever been off the ship?
A few times. Not many. And if I think about it, why would I want to? I've got everything I need here. All the whispers I hear are familiar ones. They almost feel like family. And if I want to hear about the nightmares off the ship, I can. After some Amasek. But don't go getting the wrong idea. If I have to, I'll follow you to the edge of the galaxy.
So she doesn't actually want to follow us off the ship. She's willing to, because she's one of the followers that we can take with us, but she'd rather stay on the ship, which I might have her do, because I'm already a psyker, so I don't necessarily need a second psyker to add additional perils of the warp. Let's talk about something else.
Lord Captain?
What's it like being a psyker? It's a dumb question because I'm a psyker, but we're gonna ask it anyway. What's her opinion on it, I guess?
You could ask yourself that question, eh, Lord Captain?
Idira looks at you with derision. Yeah, I'm wanting to know your opinion of the matter, though.
Every psyker feels their connection with the warp in their own way. One person might see spots and shadows out of the corner of their eye. Another feels fingers running down their spine. As for me, I've got a door in my head. One that's open just a crack. There's no way to close it, no matter how hard I try. I've just had to get used to the whispers from the other side. When I need to use it for work, I listen in more closely. But I usually just try not to notice it.
That is a cool description of how her whispers of the future work. How do you live with this whispering in your head?
Training, habit, and a little amass and a couple other things you can get on the lower decks. If you put all those together, it makes things bearable. Sometimes I even wonder if I'm imagining half the voices I hear. You know, when life on board gets a little boring. Better than listening to the living, anyhow.
Idira shrugs and chuckles. The writing has been fantastic. I know this section where we're going through and talking to everyone can be a little long and some people probably won't like it, but I'm certainly enjoying it. What would happen if your door burst open?
Well, if the door opens, that means somebody's planning to come in, right? But screw them. They're not coming through. Trust me. I know how to keep my valuable head locked up tight.
Idira chuckles, but there's a shrill, strained quality to her laughter. So, with her door metaphor that she's using, someone bursting through either means that, like when we first met her, where the warp was crazy and she was just hearing tons of noise, to the point that she didn't hear the warning about Theodore's death. But she was also out of control, just laughing because of how loud everything was. That's one meaning, but what she's talking about here, I think, is talking about possession, where an entity of the warp would enter through the door and try and possess her. And she's capable of keeping warp entities from taking her over. Which is good, because that's why she was fine and Edelthrad became a warp monster. Aren't you afraid of losing control?
Only losers who are afraid of their own gift lose control. Or idiots who never figure out what they are before it's too late. Or little kids who want to play around with their shiny new toy. If you don't know the limits of your abilities, or you're always bouncing around in your own head, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yep. Can you see my future?
All right. That's what I'm here for, after all. So, I'm just going to lean on that door in my head a little more, prick up my ears, and listen to what the warp's got to say about you. If you'll allow it, I can listen right now.
Idira wrinkles her nose and looks around. Then she wipes her hands, gives her head a shake, and finally nods. And then Idira grins like she's already heard some salacious detail. We do know the various warp entities we met during the battle that got us here. A lot of them were talking about us and the dawn and a bunch of things. And those are warp entities, so it's possible that what Idira will hear will somewhat line up with what they were saying. Whether it's true or whether that's just the chaos entities' hope for our future. But I'm curious to see if she hears something different. Sure.
All right. Let's hear what they're whispering about you.
Idira laughs, rubs her hands together, and suddenly freezes with a vacant smile on her face, her head slightly tilted. You feel goosebumps appear on your skin, and your collar begins to waver ever so slightly, as if moved by a breeze from a half-open door.
Seek not on firm ground, but in a golden hall suspended in the void. There waits a child without kin, but with a name blind to truth. She draws the brush across the canvas and does not notice that her palette is full not of paint, but of blood. And with each smear, this well does not deplete, but fills and fills up to the brim. one thing is clear. When this vessel overflows, none will remain unstained.
Huh. Speak not on firm ground, but in the golden hall suspended in the void. If I was going to guess what this might be talking about, it's obviously not talking about us because they're talking about she. So this is not our story. I'm guessing possibly our navigator, because there's 3 locations in this sector, not sector, this solar system that we are supposed to go to. A prison planet, another planet, and then a space station that the navigators live on. And so the golden hull suspended in the void, I'm guessing is the navigators, noble navigators space station. So we're talking about us looking for a navigator, presumably female, who, with a name blind to truth. I don't necessarily know what the rest is talking about, but that's what I'm thinking we're talking about, is that navigator that we're supposed to find. I don't know. Canvas, blood. I'll have to see how, presumably, her story plays out when we meet this navigator, to see how this ties into it. But that's probably the future. Again, I'm guessing this is our navigator, and that's the future of how her story is going to play out, or might play out.
Among the blind men and false prophets, a red-robed sage seeks the answer to a question. He does not know that it is not the answer he must seek, but the question that will draw everything into focus. Will you help him, rogue trader? But mark that sometimes ignorance is sweeter than oblivion.
This will be our engine seer prime that we're looking for, the red-robed sage. That's red-robed sages is a mark of the Mechanicum. So I'm guessing this will be our engine seer. That he thinks he's looking for an answer, but he's actually dealing with a question that will bring everything into focus. Cool.
A chained hound chases after glimmers of the aurora, but sparks in the scent of oil confound his nose. The chain trails after him. What will happen if you pick it up? Will you become his master? Or merely another beast in the pack of his true lord?
Chained hound. The first 2 seemed obvious because we know we're looking for 2 specific characters. The only other character I know we're potentially looking for is the interrogator of the Inquisition. But this doesn't sound like they're talking about an interrogator, I wouldn't think. I mean, possible. Chained hound. I don't know. Probably another character that will join our party. Could be the interrogator or could be someone else.
The glow of dawn bursts forth from its prison. Dungeon walls cannot contain the dark essence wallowing in the dust. A naive cub pushes his nose into a familiar hand. One that holds death in twisted glass. Cherish it or cast it off as a burden. The sword of change has already been raised. What is one more life to it?
Again, I don't know. I'm guessing these are all descriptions of different party members we're going to eventually find. So these won't make sense until we actually meet them all. But they don't sound like any of the characters that I have heard we are specifically looking for. So it's probably other people we're going to find that will join our crew.
voices are going wild. I can't make out a thing. I'll try to rein them in, somehow. But for now...
Idira strains to listen, then frowns and shakes her head. And then the psyker shrugs sheepishly and sniffs. That was a really cool bit of her giving us a hint of the future. It's far enough, it's vague enough that we don't necessarily know what's coming up, but you can try and read a couple of key phrases to get a clue of what might be coming up. So that's cool. I'd like to hear your augury, Idira. What awaits me in the future? I assume that's what we just did.
All right, let's hear what they're whispering.
If it's just the same thing, we'll skip through it. Idira laughs, rubs her hands together, and suddenly freezes with a vacant smile on her face. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, Lord Captain. The voices are going wild. I can't make out a thing.
Okay.
I'll try to rein them in, somehow.
We were
But
just
for now...
getting it from being lit up, so it's no longer a new option. Did you know Theodora von Valancius well?
None of the officers knew the Lord Captain well. Not even Abelard, and she was always closer to him than anyone else. She told me from the off that if I ever listened to anything in the warp about her without her permission, I'd be going out through the airlock. I'm not an idiot, so I never stuck my nose where it didn't belong. Only when I was asked.
Idira shakes her head. I mean, could be what led to the problem of the mutiny catching everyone by surprise. If Idira had listened, maybe there would have been some warning of the mutiny and all that. Who knows?
It's hard to wrap my head around the fact that she's gone. Lady von Valancius gave me everything I have. She opened the stars to me and the paths between them. I still think I can hear her voice.
Idira's eyes darken and a strange otherworldly expression comes over her face. And then Idira lets out a sharp breath and shakes her head. If you can hear her voice, we saw some sort of chaos entity that was talking to us with her voice. And we definitely don't want to be listening to that. Things are strained between you and Argenta, isn't that right? I mean, yeah. She's an unsanctioned psyker. And Argenta is the sister of battle. Like, they're not going to get along.
The little sister is afflicted with her own set of voices. Ones that whisper to her about corruption and heresy. The silly girl doesn't realize that if she wants to find the source, she needs to start by looking in her own head.
Idira falls silent, and then a different voice adds. A different voice? Sounded like it was Idira both times. But definitely speaking in a mocking tone about Argenta, which is not surprising. Sisters and psykers, definitely not the best of friends. Yeah, I think a sanctioned psyker who is clearly in service of the Emperor can get a pass from a Sister of Battle, but an unsanctioned psyker who's not super devoted to Terra, the throne, etc., is not going to get along with a Sister of Battle. Like, our character is a psyker, but we are a rogue trader in the service of the Emperor. As long as we're not doing anything obviously heretical, I don't think Argenta is going to have issue with us. Since we're a properly sanctioned psyker, and we're doing something in the name of the Emperor. Yeah, anything that hints of heresy, yeah. And just the fact that we have crew members who are skirting the laws and what is right for the Imperium, it's probably not going to go over well at some point. Got any new story for me, Idira?
You bet I do, Lord Captain.
Idira becomes much more animated in her expression, and her expression turns slightly dreamy as she recalls one of her stories. Okay, this is long.
So, we went to Footfall once? Well, I mean, Lord Captain Theodora went to Footfall a lot. But on that occasion, she took me with her for some reason. My day had gotten off to a bad start. My head had been yammering since I woke up, but there was nothing else for it. I had to go. We arrive at the place, and what a place! All the gentlemen and ladies dressed to kill, showing off their encrusted implants, all clustered around little tables. Well, turned out it was a gaming den. And not just any gaming den, but one run by somebody with deep pockets for people with just as much cash to splash. You should have seen it. People gambling away planets in a game of regicide. Anyway, so the Lord Captain wanted me to help her beat some guy. So I tell her, the chips won't land in your favor. You'll get a bad hand. Don't sit down at that table, your ladyship. But did she listen? Of course she didn't. If there's one thing she never lacked, it's stubbornness.
What is this button for? Apparently nothing. But I don't think that had been there before.
So they sat down and the cards were dealt. I'm hovering around like I'm not involved, but I'm keeping my eye on things. And everything in my head keeps getting louder and louder. Anyway, it's a good thing I realized in time that my mind wasn't going haywire over a losing hand, but something else. I made some excuse to drag the Lord Captain up from the table and took her away from that place. And a few minutes later, the room where we'd been... It turned out some wise guy had the same bright idea to bring a pet psyker along with him. One of those ones who just scuttle around in Footfall's underbelly. And the psyker just freaked out, I guess. After all the commotion, people went to see what happened in the room. And they'd all gone for each other's throats. Literally. With teeth. And I think they completely detached that asteroid from Footfall and pushed it off into open space so it would head off toward the local star.
Idira can't help herself and bursts out laughing, and then weeping, Idira wipes away a tear. So, yeah. An untrained psyker, unsanctioned psyker, lost control, and yeah, whenever psykers go crazy, one of the proper responses is just to destroy everything potentially corrupted. So, tearing off that asteroid and sending it into a star is a totally valid choice. Yes, rogue traders are good at pushing the boundaries on heresy and whatnot. Yes, rogue traders have authorization to do what they must to help with gaining profit and stabilizing a region, etc. And so they're perfectly capable and allowed to do things that for anyone without the warrant of trade would be considered heretical. In the same way that the Inquisition can get away with doing heretical things, like reading heretical text or having unsanctioned psykers in their retinue, whatever they need to do, because they have that higher calling. But if anyone else without a higher calling tried to get away with the stuff that a rogue trader or an inquisitor can do, they would be burned or killed in some manner because it's heresy. So it's kind of fun where we can have a unsanctioned psyker on our crew, and the Sister Battle can't really say or do anything about it because it's totally lawful for us to do that. But if we, you know, were down on a planet and she found a random merchant who had a unsanctioned psyker, then that would be heretical and worthy of death. We're just a cut above the rest of the people because of our warrant of trade, so the Emperor has given us leave to do whatever it takes to stabilize this region. And if it takes heretical actions, working with xenos, delving into chaos, whatever, it's sanctioned as long as it makes the Imperium better. Alright, I must take my leave.
Of course. Always at your service. Whenever you need me.
I like Idira's character. What they did with her viewing of the future was really well done. It was handled great. Okay, no one else down here to talk to. So let's check out this side. Bridge Technomat. Nope. Anyone else with a name or of interest? Doesn't look like it, so I think that is everyone of note on the main crew. We have a map. We do. So we've talked to our 3 party members already. Toward captain's quarters or another compartment, and then using the map to go somewhere. However, we're basically at my usual stopping time, so I think I'm going to call it quits here. And next time, I don't know if I'm going to... I'll probably explore the various side hallways, so go to our captain's quarters as well as whatever this extra corridor down there is. And then after that, we'll actually click on this map and go somewhere. So thanks for being here. Thanks for Same. I hope you enjoyed it, and I stream 2 to 3 days a week, usually on the weekends. Well, exclusively on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So different variety of games, but next Saturday we'll be continuing with more Rogue Trader, and so I hope you'll be here. See you then.